Dock crews were wrenching open Briarene Kest's locked pump gates when she jammed her shoulder against the pressure wheel and threw her weight into the brake. Beneath the half-repaired warship cradle, dry stone gleamed silver. Water rose straight up through it. Not seepage. Not a leak running downhill. Moonwater climbed from the floor in a thin vertical thread, bright as a blade under the dock lamps, lifting dust instead of wetting it. Briarene's breath caught. Who broke my closure seal? No one answered fast enough. The lower dock was still full of workers. Men with tar buckets, scaffold crews, 2 boys hauling chain, all beneath a hull heavy enough to crush them before anyone reached the gates. Beyond the pump house, naval horns sounded. A foreman held up a stamped order. Dragon King Aldren Voss had signed it. Briarene saw him at the high inspection rail a heartbeat later. 26, warm bronze skin, a strong square-jawed face, intense dark blue eyes, black hair tied with a bronze dragon clasp, black admiral's coat catching silver light, a pale crescent scar where his collar opened. Beautiful enough to still the room. Powerful enough to kill men by believing the wrong architect. Naval architect Sylvar Quill stood beside him, elegant hands folded over plans. Superficial plaster cracks, Majesty. Engineer Kest panicked over cosmetic faulting. Briarene pointed to the moonwater. External sea pressure has crossed a concealed fracture. Silver's mouth curved. Moon. Tide vapor through old stone. Dramatic, not structural. Water climbing upward through a dry floor is not vapor. Her wrist gauge ticked hard. Pump strain rose beyond safe range. Aldren's gaze moved from the silver water to the men below. Concern cut through his command too late. You ordered them back under that ship, Briarene said. I ordered the dock reopened on structural advice, he answered. The fleet cannot sit unrepaired while privateers gather beyond the headlands. The fleet will sit better than dead workers. The moonwater thread thickened. Briarene had 1 clean pressure trace at the wheel and 27 workers beneath the cradle. If she held the trace, she could prove when the fracture crossed pressure. If she left it, the pumps might erase the first reading, and Sylvar would call the warning theatrical. She chose the workers. Out, she shouted. Every man off the floor, leave tools, leave chains, north stairs first. 2 guards moved toward her. Engineer, step away from the wheel. Briarene slammed the auxiliary alarm with her elbow. Red bells cracked through the dock. Aldren raised one hand. Let her clear the floor. It was not trust. It was a pause with a crown behind it. Briarene seized it. She spun the pressure wheel half shut, enough to slow the overdriven pumps without reversing the chamber. The moonwater column shivered but did not vanish. Good. Terrible. Still there. Harbor dragons back from the floor, she called. No claws on stone, signal them to the gate beams. A black bronze harbor dragon crouched near the west cradle, plated shoulders tense, salt silver throat scales flaring as it rumbled at the floor. It flattened its tidal wings and refused to step where the silver water climbed. At Briarene's hand signal, it backed toward the beamline. Workers ran. 1 boy slipped beside a tar bucket. Briarene left the wheel, skidded down the iron stair, and dragged him clear as a cradle block groaned above them. A burst of moonwater lifted a hammer from the floor and held it trembling in the air. Sylvar descended only to the middle platform. Her unauthorized pump change caused that surge. Briarene looked up, soaked to the knees, though no water had spread across the floor. Then explain why the first column rose before I touched the wheel. A clerk appeared with a suspension notice. By order of the Royal Naval Works Office, Briarene Kest is relieved of dock authority pending review for obstruction. For one hard second, she saw the apprentice she had once failed to save, another room of men calling seepage harmless until it became a grave. Not again. Aldren read the notice, jaw tightening. Quill, I did not order her removed from safety work. You ordered the dock reopened, Majesty. Command must be singular during fleet repairs. Briarene reached the first moonwater point and marked the stone with chalk, then pressed her wrist gauge to the floor. The needle snapped upward. She carved the reading before the pumps could blur it. The warship cradle groaned again. Everyone above the red line, she ordered. This time, even the guards moved. Aldren came down the stair, boots striking wet stone that should have been dry. He stopped short of her chalk mark. Can you map the fracture from that? No. Moonwater tells us pressure crossed the wall. It does not tell us where the wall is failing. Silvar smiled from the platform. Then she admits she cannot prove danger beyond spectacle. A second silver column burst through the floor under the keel of the royal flagship, lifting the ship cradle while workers were still scrambling toward the stairs. The flagship cradle lifted 3 inches before the first worker screamed. Briarene ran toward the sound, not the ship. A man had been pinned between the east skid and a rolling brace block, his boot trapped, his face gray with the knowledge that the keel above him was no longer resting where stone had promised it would rest. Do not pull him, she shouted. You will take the ankle with it. The second moonwater column thickened beneath the keel, silver water climbing upward with impossible obedience to pressure, carrying flakes of stone like stars. The royal flagship leaned in its cradle, slow enough to watch, fast enough to kill. Aldren started down from the stair. Stay off the marked floor, Briarene snapped. He stopped. That mattered. Not enough. But it mattered. She dropped beside the trapped worker and braced one shoulder under the smaller block. Tomas, wedge from the west. Rel, cut the tar rope. Harbor dragon to the beam, not the floor. The black bronze harbor dragon at the gate rumbled, wings flattened, amber eyes fixed on the moonwater. Briarene gave the dock safety signal with 2 sharp motions. The dragon hooked its foreclaws into the iron gate beam and pulled sideways, easing strain off the cradle chain without stepping onto the failing stone. The brace block shifted a finger's width. The worker's boot came free. His ankle bent wrong, but his leg was his. Briarene dragged him behind the red line as a cradle timber cracked behind her. Silvar Quill's voice carried from the middle platform. Her panic has unsettled the cradle. Briarene tasted salt on her lips, though no sea had spread across the floor. The sea is inside the wall. She forced herself back to method. Panic was Silvar's language for women who counted faster than men with titles. Pump house, she called. Output slate. Public reading. Aldren turned to the pump master. Bring it. Silvar lifted one hand. Majesty, the pumps are under naval repair sequence. Interrupting the output log will damage the inspection record. The inspection record has water rising through stone, Aldren said. The pump master arrived with a slate and eyes that avoided Silvar. Briarene set her wrist pressure gauge beside the main wheel. She called the numbers loud enough for workers, guards, and officers to hear. Pump speed, chamber draw, tide load, pressure return. The pump output claimed the dock was dry and stable. Her gauge needle hammered above safe range with every moonwater pulse. Mismatch, she said. The pumps are pulling harder than the log admits, and pressure is returning through the retaining chambers. Silvar descended another step. A wrist gauge knocked against stone during a rescue is not a standard instrument. A guard reached for it. Aldren moved before Briarene had to. He did not touch the gauge. He put his hand between the guard and her wrist. No one takes her instrument. Briarene looked at that hand, broad and steady, and hated the small relief it gave her. You may witness, she said. You may not hold. I will witness. She drove a hollow brass corer into the nearest moonwater point. The stone resisted. then surrendered a plug streaked dark at the center. Salt should have stopped near the surface if Silvar's plaster claim were true. The core glistened deep. Mark extraction, she told the pump master. Time, depth, moonwater point, witness. Aldren signed the slate with a charcoal stub and stepped back. Briarene sealed the core in glass. Before she could set wax over the rim, Silvar's assistant stumbled against the table with a rinse bucket. Clean water splashed across the tray and over the outside of the jar. Clumsy fool, Silvar said too smoothly. The assistant went pale. Briarene snatched the jar upright. The core was still inside, but the outer water made the salt line look blurred to any lazy eye. Silvar sighed. Contaminated. A shame. No, Briarene pointed to the slate. The depth mark, pressure reading, and moonwater point were recorded before your rinse touched the tray. The core is challenged, not erased. Aldren's face hardened at the word your. He looked at Silvar, not away from him. Good. Let him look at the man he had believed. The flagship groaned again. Briarene followed the sound to the retaining wall behind fresh plaster. A hairline crack had been painted pale and smooth, but one copper displacement pin still sat half hidden behind the patch, bent toward the dock floor. She scraped plaster away with her knife. The pin should have been straight if the wall had not moved since the last inspection. It had folded like a reed under pressure. Briarene lifted the bent pin for everyone to see. This wall moved before the dock reopened. From beneath the flagship, a third pulse of moonwater struck the keel block, and the royal ship slid an inch toward the broken cradle. The royal flagship slid another inch before Briarene found the angle that would hold it. West chain 2 links, she ordered. Not 3. 3 will tear the cradle. The harbor dragon braced against the gate beam, black bronze shoulders bunching as dock workers shortened the chain. The ship groaned, settled against the emergency wedge, and stopped moving. Stopped was not safe. Stopped was mercy with a cracked wall under it. Briarene stood beneath the keel only long enough to mark the third moonwater point. Silver water climbed beside her chalk line and trembled around the bent displacement pin. We need the pressure house, she said. Silvar Quill had already understood that. By the time they reached the upper passage, naval guards had sealed the pressure house gate with black readiness wax. Inspection slates were gone from the wall racks. A clerk carried rolled pump schedules toward the outer office, walking too fast for innocence. Aldren Voss caught him by the shoulder. The clerk froze. Leave them on the table, Aldren said. Silvar's voice followed like polished steel. Majesty, pressure house records govern fleet readiness. A suspended engineer cannot be allowed to handle naval sequence logs after causing an emergency pump disruption. Briarene wiped moonwater from her gloves. Your overdriven pumps were hiding pressure return. My pumps kept the dock dry until you panicked. The dock is not dry. The sea is standing upright under your flagship. Aldren looked at the sealed gate, then at her. Tell me what access costs. The question was almost right. Not permission, not apology, cost. Briarene faced him with the pressure gauge still strapped to her wrist. You may open doors, command guards away from workers, require records into witness light, and hold ships where they are. You may not touch pressure traces, move ships for ceremony, command civilian inspectors, shorten load tests, silence injured workers, or ask me for trust before repair. Workers in the passage stopped breathing around the words. Silvar gave a faint laugh. A king receiving dock rules from a suspended woman. A king whose order put men beneath moving stone, Aldren said. He broke the wax with his signet, then stepped back from the gate. Agreed. Briarene entered first. The pressure house smelled wrong, too much fresh oil, too little salt. The pump slates for the last 3 inspections had been removed. leaving pale rectangles on the boards. Emergency gate logs lay stacked in a new order, all edges aligned as if truth could be made tidy. "Where are the diver reports?" she asked. A young officer swallowed. "Transferred to lower salvage command." "When?" He looked toward Silvar. Aldren did not. "Answer her." "This morning." Briarene marked the missing rack with chalk. Absence could testify if named before it was replaced. A bell rang from the lower dock. Harbor dragons rumbled in answer, refusing the floor again. The fracture was still speaking. Then a man climbed from the inspection well, water streaming from his gray beard and scarred diving collar. Tomas Vin hauled himself onto the stone with one hand and kept a slate tucked under the other arm. Briarene recognized him before he bowed. Independent lower chamber diver. Civilian guild, not Navy. "I was ordered off the east retaining chamber before sunrise," Tomas said. "Thought you would want what they told me to forget." Silvar's face tightened. Vin was removed for unsafe descent. Tomas spat dock water neatly beside the drain. "I descended safe. The wall was not." He laid the slate down. Chalk marks covered it. A long diagonal fracture behind the chamber ribs. Arrows toward the pump return, and 3 circles where moonwater had first bled silver through mortar. Briarene knelt. "You saw this before the reopen order?" "Yesterday evening. I marked the wall. Quill's men sent me up, then sent 2 Navy divers down with white chalk. They covered my red marks before inspection." Silvar said, "Civilian divers resent naval discipline." Briarene looked at Aldren. "Do not make me carry his truth for him." Aldren turned to Tomas. "Say it again for the workers." Tomas faced the passage. Lower retaining chamber was cracked through the rib line before the dock reopened. We were ordered away. The first meaningful piece of trust came not from Aldren's anger, but from what he did with it. He did not seize the slate. He did not threaten a confession. He ordered 3 worker witnesses to mark Tomas's report and stood aside while Briarene compared the diver's circles with her moonwater points. They matched. "Now cement stores," Briarene said. Silvar moved too quickly. "Cement inventory has no bearing on pressure readings. Weak fill has everything to do with a wall that moves." The storehouse ledger was missing 2 pages, but the floor told more than paper. High-grade retaining cement should have been stacked in blue-banded casks. Only gray repair fill remained, soft at the rim when Briarene scraped it with her knife. Aldren lifted a broken cask lid but stopped before touching the powder. "Where did the blue-banded load go?" No one answered. Tomas did. "I saw those casks before dawn, loaded onto 3 barges, not Navy marks, private harbor pennants." Briarene's pulse slowed with a terrible pleasure of shape becoming system. "Whose harbor?" Tomas looked from her to the king, then to Silvar's pale, furious face. "Quillwater Point," he said. "Silvar's private harbor." Moonwater kept rising while Briarene Kest drew the fracture on the dock wall. Not the whole fracture. The magic would not give her that mercy. It gave silver vertical points through stone, each one proof that pressure had crossed where pressure should never cross, but the line between them had to be earned by measurement. She marked the first column beside the pump wheel, the second beneath the flagship keel, the third near the bent displacement pin, and Tomas Ven's 3 lower chamber circles from his diver slate. Then she pulled a string through the map pins. The string cut diagonally toward the east retaining ribs. "Not plaster," Tomas said. "Not even close," Briarene answered. Silvar Quill stood at the pressure house door with 2 officers, pale composure restored. "A string game over emergency chalk is not engineering." "No," Briarene said. "It is where engineering begins." She ordered 3 cement cores, 1 from the patched wall above the waterline, 1 from the lower chamber rib Tomas had marked, and one from the gray fill in the storehouse. Aldren Voss stood behind the witness table, Black Admiral's coat dark with dock spray, hands clasped behind him where everyone could see them empty. He had learned the posture quickly. She did not let that become trust. The upper wall core looked respectable until Briarene pressed it beneath the testing blade. It crumbled at the edge. True retaining cement should have shaved clean and hard. This gave way like old sugar. The lower rib core came out wet to the center. Briarene held it against the salt depth gauge. Salt, penetration, past 3 inches. Silvar's brows lifted. From your contaminated core? This is a new core, witnessed from the chamber rib, and handled by the same suspended engineer. Aldren's jaw tightened. Briarene did not look at him. Let him speak. He is telling us which proof will frighten him. A rough laugh moved through the workers and died quickly when the flagship groaned below. She opened the first salt core jar from the moonwater point, the one Silvar's assistant had splashed with rinse water. The outer glass still looked blurred, and the exposed surface now read weaker than it had at extraction. Silvar smiled. Dilution alters salt. Your earliest proof fails. It changes the jar, Briarene said. Not the sequence. She laid out the extraction slate. Time, depth, pressure reading, moonwater point, pump strain, displacement pin, witness marks. The risk gauge struck unsafe return before rinse water touched the tray. The moonwater rose before I cut the core. The depth mark was carved while the stone plug was still in the corer. If the jar were clean now, it would still not erase what the wall did first. The pump master cleared his throat. I marked the time. Aldren added quietly, so did I. The words mattered because they cost him his old convenient doubt. Briarene moved next to pump schedules. 3 inspection days showed ordinary draw, ordinary return, ordinary dryness. Too ordinary. She compared them to fuel tallies, pump chain wear, and the heat scored into the brass wheel teeth. Your logs say the pumps ran at half pull, she said. The pump master looked sick. They ran near full. During inspections? He nodded once. Silvar cut in. To accelerate routine drying. To hide pressure return, Briarene said. Overdrive the pumps, and moonwater cannot gather long enough for inspectors to see it. Slow them for real repair, and the sea stands upright. Aldren's face changed as the record changed meaning. I saw clean floors on inspection reports. You saw floors being forced to look clean. He looked down toward Dock 4, where harbor dragons rumbled beyond the red line and men carried the injured worker toward the infirmary. His voice lowered. Privateers burned 2 coastal supply piers last winter. I was told if the flagship missed Moontide refit, villages would be exposed. I believe speed was protection. Briarene measured a delivery cask while answering him. Speed is not protection when it builds graves under ships. No, he said, it is not. There was no defense in it. That made him harder to hate cleanly and no easier to forgive. The delivery weights finished what the cement began. Blue-banded retaining cement had been invoiced for Dock 4 in full. The storehouse held weak gray fill. 3 barge receipts showed heavy cargo leaving before dawn toward Quillwater Point. Contractor marks on the casks matched Silvar's private harbor stone seal, a curling Q cut into the wax. Briarene lined the numbers beside the chamber map. Missing cement weight, missing slate pages, overdriven pump hours, unpaid compensation entries for earlier, minor slips in the lower chamber. Minor slips? Aldren asked. Workers hurt before today, Briarene said. Kept out of the main injury record. Silvar's calm sharpened. Compensation claims are not structural evidence. They are pressure speaking through bodies before it spoke through stone. The dock bell struck once below. Not alarm. Load shift. Briarene looked from the cracked wall map to the invoices, then to the gray fill dust on her glove. The truth settled cold and complete. This dock was not simply under-repaired, she said. The safe cement, the labor, and the money were diverted before I closed it. My closure did not delay repairs. It interrupted a theft already built into the wall. Below them, moonwater climbed through a fourth point, directly under the inspection platform. Sylvar Quill barred Briarene from the pressure house with Aldren's own seal. The fourth moonwater point still glowed beneath the inspection platform when naval guards crossed halberds before the gate. Black readiness wax sealed the door Briarene had opened an hour earlier. A new notice hung over the broken strip. Dock 4, reopened by royal command. Engineer Kest, denied access pending fleet review. Sylvar stood beside it with plaster dust on his cuffs and victory arranged into mild concern. For worker safety, she may no longer alter pumps or records. For worker safety, Briarene said, you are locking out the one person who knows where the pressure is rising. Aldren came up the stair behind her. The crescent scar at his collarbone showed where his wet admiral's coat had pulled open. His gaze struck the notice. Then Sylvar. Remove it. Sylvar bowed. Majesty. Your reopening order restored naval authority. If the suspended engineer interferes now, every measurement taken afterward becomes politically contaminated. The fleet inspection begins at moonrise. She may certify the dock safe through proper naval review. Briarene did not look at Aldren. She could feel the cost of him standing there. Power enough to break the seal, guilt enough to want to, and a signature still being used as the lock. No, she said. I will not certify a floor that is trying to drown upward. Sylvar's smile thinned. Then the review proceeds without you. The gate shut in her face. For one breath, terror reached for her throat. Another warning dismissed. Another apprentice lost in a place someone called manageable. Worker sheds, she said. Pump tunnels after that. If he owns the office, we build the dock outside it. Tomas Finn met her at the south shed with 3 divers and a bundle of damp sketches hidden inside an oilcloth shirt. Dock workers crowded close, some limping, some holding bandaged hands, all watching Aldren as if a king could either feed their families or erase their injuries by looking away. Briarene spread a board across 2 sawhorses. Name, shift, wall sound, moonwater sighting, pump behavior, injury, who told you to continue. One man showed a scar where stone splinters had crossed his forearm 2 weeks earlier. They called it a slip. Another described silver sweating from a floor seam during second tide, wiped away before the inspection party arrived. A crane boy drew the place where harbor dragons had refused to settle 3 nights running. Tomas laid out his hidden diver sketches. Red chalk marks showed the lower chamber fracture before white chalk covered them. Briarene matched them to her moonwater map from memory, because the official copy was locked away. Aldren stood outside the shed door until she glanced at him. Only then did he enter, stopping behind the chalk line she drew. I can order the pressure house opened by force, he said. You can, Briarene answered, scraping cement chips from a worker's boot heel into a tin. Then Sylvar says the king and the suspended engineer broke evidence together after the records turned dangerous. His jaw tightened. My order is still harming you. It is still harming them. She nodded toward the workers. Remorse cannot hold a wall. Inspection authority has to leave naval command. The shed went quiet enough for rain to tick on the roof. Aldren accepted it before them. Then that becomes part of the repair. After proof, she said, not as apology. They entered the pump tunnels through a coal hatch Sylvar's office rarely used. The air below smelled of oil, salt, and heated iron. Main pump slates should have hung beside each timing drum. 2 had been replaced. The ink was fresh, the pull rates tidy, the edges dry where tunnel damp should have curled them. Briarene touched one corner with her glove. New. The pump master swallowed. Not mine. Then we use what the replacement cannot change. Behind the drive wheel, under a panel warped by old steam, she found the hidden pressure drum, a brass cylinder that recorded vibration by needle scratch when the main pumps exceeded safe pull. Its paper strip was still inside, ribbed with violent peaks from each inspection hour. The replaced slates claimed half pull. The hidden drum showed overdrive. A distant bell struck from the upper dock. Fleet inspection rehearsal. Silvar was already moving the ceremony faster. Briarene marked the drum strip, then checked emergency gate timing with Tomas in the cross tunnel. Gate 3 answered late by 7 heartbeats. Gate 4 answered not at all until a worker struck the release chain with a mallet. If the floor splits, Tomas said, those 7 heartbeats drown the lower bay. Only if people are still in it. She looked toward the dock through the tunnel grating. Lanterns were being polished on the inspection platform over the 4th moonwater point. Officers were laying carpets above stone that had already failed. At the shed door, a woman waited with a black shawl twisted in both hands. Her eyes were red, but her voice had the scraped steadiness of someone who had finished weeping because work remained. My husband was the one pinned under the cradle, she said. They brought me this before the surgeon brought me him. She handed Briarene a compensation denial. The paper called the injury pre-existing lameness aggravated by unauthorized emergency conduct. At the bottom, beside Silvar's office mark, was a contractor stamp pressed in blue wax. A curling Q, the same private harbor mark Briarene had found on the diverted stone deliveries. The fleet inspection began over a floor already trying to lift. Briarene reached the upper gallery as officers unrolled a blue carpet across the inspection platform directly above the 4th moonwater point. Lanterns burned on polished brass. 2 warships sat in their cradles below, the flagship over the east fracture, and the smaller spear ship beside Chamber 3, keel blocks newly painted to hide strain marks. Moon tide pressed against the retaining chambers like a hand closing around the dock. Clear the floor, Briarene said. Silvar Quill turned from the Admiralty guests. Engineer Kest has no authority here. The floor is lifting. The fleet will see confidence, not hysteria. Briarene looked past him to workers standing in ceremonial lines beneath ships that should have been empty of men. Rel, take the north stair. Tomas, get those men above the red line. No tools, no chains, no heroics. Guards moved toward her. Aldren Voss stepped off the gallery before they reached her, black admiral's coat snapping around him, dark blue eyes fixed on his own command structure. No one touches her. Silvar's smile did not break. Majesty, she is interfering with the inspection. She is keeping workers alive. Briarene did not wait for the argument to decide the dock. She ran to the pressure board and saw the hidden drum's warning made visible in metal. Pump heat, chain trimmer, return pressure climbing. Emergency gate 4 still lagged. Chamber 3 sat empty after the morning crew shift. If she flooded that chamber first, the pressure might equalize away from the cracked rib. If she waited, the dock floor could split under both warships. Safe side vents, she called. Open north first, then chamber 3. Harbor dragons off the stone. Beam line only. The black bronze dragons rumbled from their tow posts. Plated shoulders lifting, salt-silver throats flared at the moonwater scent. Briarene gave the dock safety signal, with both arms wide and down. They backed to the gate beams, wings flattened, amber eyes bright with alarm. The first column burst. Silver moonwater shot beneath the flagship. No longer a thread, but a glowing pillar. It struck the keel block and lifted it hard enough to crack the cradle chain. The ship lurched upward. a dead thing rising against sense. The spearship answered a breath later. Moonwater punched through the smaller cradle floor, lifting its forward keel until men shouted from every rail. Stones split between the ships with a sound like a giant tooth breaking. A cradle block rolled. Joss, carrying a lantern he had been ordered to place for the inspection, slipped beside the spearship track. The block struck his thigh and hip, pinning him against the rail. Briarene's vision narrowed to the injury, the pressure, the vents. "Do not pull him straight," she shouted. "Lift the block with chain pressure. Tomas, wedge. Rel, cut the lantern line before oil spreads." Silver seized the moment from the platform. Her unauthorized flooding plan destabilized the chamber. "Arrest her, before she sinks the dock." 2 guards started down the stair. Aldren moved between them and the pressure board. "Stand down. Majestu, the inspection is cancelled." His voice carried across the dock, over groaning timber and rushing moonwater. All naval crews follow Briarene Kest's pressure signals. Emergency pressure command is hers until the dock is stable. For 1 heartbeat, the dock heard the difference between a royal order used as a lock and a royal order used as a door. Briarene took it. "Vent north 1, half turn, chamber 3 floodgate ready, not open until my mark." The pump master repeated her words exactly. Aldren repeated them to the officers without changing a syllable. Moonwater climbed higher beneath the flagship, lifting tools, chain links, and a broken wedge into the air. The floor split wider. Water roared inside stone where no open channel should have been. Briarene watched the timing, not the terror. Pump return surged. Chamber wall answered. Gate 4 trembled but held closed. Chamber 3 waited empty. "Now," she said. The floodgate opened. Sea pressure rushed into the empty retaining chamber with a hollow boom that shook dust from the gallery. For 1 dreadful moment, the moonwater columns thickened instead of falling. The flagship rose another inch. The spearship twisted sideways. Joss screamed as the block pressed harder. Then pressure shifted. The silver pillars thinned. Not gone. Never gone. But lower, weaker, pulled toward the chamber that had no men inside it. "Dragon pull," Briarene shouted. "Beam line west. 2 breaths only." The harbor dragons hauled together. Chains tightened. The rolling block lifted enough for Tomas and Rel to drag Joss clear. His leg hung wrong, blood dark through his trousers, but he was breathing. Aldren stripped off his coat and shoved it under the man's head. He did not look to Briarene for approval. He did not look away from what his reopened dock had done. Silvar pointed at the flooded chamber, face bright with anger. "Warship damage from her order. Witness it." The engineer flooded royal property. Briarene turned on him, soaked to the waist, hands steady on the wheel. "I flooded an empty chamber so the occupied floor would not become a grave." Aldren faced the gathered officers. "And I ordered the inspection that put them there. That will be witnessed too." The dock settled by inches. Crews carried Joss above the red line. Dragons stayed on beams. The flagship still hung unevenly but no longer climbed. The spearship's keel block sat cracked and exposed, showing gray fill where retaining cement should have been. Briarene climbed to the inspection platform to mark the 5th moonwater point. Behind the torn blue carpet and spilled lanterns stacked in shadow beneath Silvar's presentation boards stood 6 cement pallets covered by naval canvas. 1 canvas had slipped during the pressure shift. Blue-banded casks showed through. Each pallet bore a curling Q stone stamp for Quillwater Point. Briarene kept one hand on the blue-banded cement cask while moonwater glowed through the cracked dock floor below. "Do not move these pallets," she said. "Do not wipe the stamps. Do not carry 1 cask out for royal safekeeping." Workers obeyed before officers did. Aldren Voss stood with his coat folded under Joss's head at the upper stair, sleeves wet, crescent scar pale against his collarbone. He saw the curling Q stamp on the casks. "Quillwater Point," he said. "Only one piece," Briarene answered. "If we name the harbor before the system speaks, Silvar will hide behind your reopen order and my emergency flood." Silvar Quill lifted both hands. "The facts are plain. His Majesty reopened Dock 4. Engineer Kest altered pumps, flooded a chamber, and damaged 2 royal warships. The cement behind this platform is reserve material." The dock rumbled beneath the lie. Briarene climbed onto the inspection platform and faced workers, divers, pump masters, officers, contractors, and harbor dragons crouched along the gate beams. No record leaves. No contractor opens a ledger without witnesses. Aldren stepped one stair below her. Engineer Kest holds emergency pressure command. She placed the 5 moonwater points on a chalkboard. Pump wheel, flagship keel, bent displacement pin, inspection platform, spearship cradle. Beside them she laid Tomas Ven's diver slate. "Moonwater rises vertically only when sea pressure has crossed a hidden retaining fracture," she said. "It warned us. It did not map the fracture. We mapped it." Tomas pointed to the matching circles. "I marked those chamber ribs yesterday. Quill's Navy divers covered my red chalk with white before inspection." Silvar smiled. "A disgruntled civilian diver." "A living one," Tomas said. "Because I was ordered away before the wall could bury me." Briarene lifted the bent copper displacement pin. "This pin was hidden behind fresh plaster. It bent before the dock reopened. The wall moved before my alarm." She set out the salt core slate. Silvar's assistant splashed rinse water over the first core. That challenged the jar, not the sequence. The depth mark, pressure reading, moonwater point, and witness marks were recorded before contamination. The pump master raised his hand. "I marked the time." Aldren said, "So did I." The officers shifted. Briarene moved to the cement cores. One upper patch crumbled under the testing blade. One lower rib core was wet to its center. Gray fill from the spearship cradle block broke apart between her gloved fingers. Dock 4 was invoiced for blue-banded retaining cement. "This is weak fill. The real cement sits hidden behind Silvar's platform with Quillwater Point stamps." A contractor tried to step back. A harbor dragon rumbled, and the man stopped. Briarene unrolled the pump schedules. 3 inspections showed ordinary draw, fuel tallies, chain wear, heat scoring, and the hidden pressure drum show overdrive. The pumps were run hard enough to hide seepage while inspectors looked at clean floors. The hidden drum strip crossed the board, scratched with violent peaks. "Clean floors," she said, "were manufactured." Silvar's voice sharpened. Even if repairs lagged, her flood damaged the fleet. The warships rose because she opened Chamber 3. "The warships rose before Chamber 3 opened," Briarene said. "Everyone here saw moonwater lift them first. I flooded an empty chamber after the rise to pull pressure away from occupied stone." Rel lifted his voice. "She told us out before the floor split," Tomas added. "And Joss lives because pressure shifted." Joss's wife stepped forward with the compensation denial clasped in both hands. "My husband's crushed hip was called pre-existing lameness before the surgeon finished binding him." Briarene held the denial beside the contractor wax. Same curling Q mark. Compensation claims, cement deliveries, pump slates, private harbor approvals, all traced through Silvar's office. Aldren looked at Silvar then, not seeking an explanation, but refusing one. Silvar's last defense came cold. "Majesty, your fear of privateers set the schedule. Your signature reopened the dock. If there is guilt, it begins at the throne." "Yes," Aldren said. The word struck the dock quiet. "My signature reopened Dock 4. I believed false inspections because they promised speed. I put workers under breaking stone and ships over a fracture. I will answer for that before them. He turned to workers. The fleet ceremony is abandoned. Dock 4 is grounded. No warship moves until independent engineers certify the retaining chambers. Silvar Quill is removed from naval architecture, pump command, contracts, compensation, diver assignments, and emergency gates pending public trial. Silvar's face lost color. Aldren continued, all repair contracts open tonight. Corrupt agreements are canceled. Injured workers and families are paid from the Crown Treasury before naval claim courts touch the papers. Joss's care is royal expense. Every prior injury hidden as a slip is reopened. He faced the contractors. Quillwater Point is seized as evidence. Materials purchased for Dock 4 return here. Private harbor labor paid from stolen naval funds will be compensated, not punished for orders they did not write. Briarene watched him closely. Public words were easy compared with power surrendered. Aldren took the back of the Fleet Inspection Proclamation and wrote across it with a carpenter's pencil. No royal or naval override of pressure closures. Civilian pressure engineers hold final safety authority. Pump logs, hidden drums, cement tests, diver reports, compensation claims, and emergency gate tests remain public. No fleet ceremony may proceed over an unresolved pressure mark. Harbor dragons may leave unsafe floors by engineer signal. He signed first, then set the pencil beside Briarene without brushing her hand. Will you witness that I signed away the authority I misused? I will witness the signature, Briarene said. Not forgiveness. I am not asking for it. She signed. Tomas signed. The pump master, Rel, Joss's wife, 2 crane boys, 3 divers, a shaken contractor, and a naval officer signed after her. Silvar was taken from the platform while moonwater still trembled in the cracks, and no one pretended the floor was safe because justice had begun. Only after the main charge ended did Aldren step down below Briarene again. The rebuilt authority is yours if you accept it, he said. Briarene looked across Dock 4. Broken cradle, flooded chamber, injured men, harbor dragons on the beams, and silver moonwater where stone had failed. I will decide, she said, after a rebuilt wall holds through a full moon tide. Dock 4 was rebuilt without music. No banners crossed the pump house. No officers polished brass for visitors. Civilian engineers stood where admirals had once stood, and worker witnesses read every cement batch aloud before Briarene Kest allowed a cask to open. Blue-banded retaining cement, Tomas Finn called. Weight matches invoice. Seal uncut. Briarene checked the stamp, the grit, the set. Then she marked the public board herself. Her brass wrist gauge rested against her left pulse, ticking with the same stern patience it had held through collapse. Below, Dock 4 no longer looked wounded, though she knew better than to trust stone because it looked clean. New retaining ribs curved behind the walls. Chamber 3 had been rebuilt, not merely drained. Emergency gates had fresh chains, double release levers, and painted timing marks. The hidden pressure drum was no longer hidden. It sat behind glass where every inspector could read its scratches. Joss watched from a chair near the north red line, one leg bound in a steel brace. His wife held the compensation writ on her lap, paid before any naval clerk could question whether his hip had been worth the trouble of truth. Aldren Voss carried no sword and wore no admiral's coat. He stood among the worker witnesses in a plain black dock jacket, warm bronze face thinner with sleepless repair, dark blue eyes following Briarene's signals instead of the ship's. She had not let him mistake presence for absolution. For 12 days he had paid injured workers, reopened old claims, returned stolen cement from Quillwater Point, compensated laborers who had built under Silvar's orders, and signed civilian pressure law into the harbor register. All of it mattered. None of it held the sea back yet. Moon, tide load begins, Briarene said. The pumps slowed to test pull. External pressure rose against the rebuilt chambers. Harbor dragons crouched along the beamline, black bronze shoulders low, salt silver throats flaring as they listened to stone. None refused the floor, because none had been ordered onto it. That was part of the new rule, too. Briarene watched the gauge. First quarter load, no vertical silver threads. Half load, pump return steady. 3/4 load. Gate 4 answered in 2 heartbeats when Rel pulled the test chain. Gate 3 answered in 1. Full moon tide pressed. The dry floor stayed dry. No silver water climbed through stone. No hammer lifted. No dust glittered in an impossible column. The flagship's rebuilt cradle held its keel level. Not proud, only safe. A sound moved through the dock, rough and quiet. Men breathing, women crying without covering their faces. Engineers writing numbers with shaking hands because proof deserved ink even when hearts wanted relief. Briarene did not smile until the pressure drum finished its full turn and showed no violent peak. "Record it," she said. Tomas laughed once. Already writing. Only then did Aldren climb the lower stair. He stopped 2 steps beneath her hand at the pressure wheel. "The wall held," he said. "The wall held because the work was done where everyone could see it." Yes. She looked at him fully. The crescent scar at his collarbone showed above the plain jacket. Once, that scar had belonged to a king who used urgency like a key. Now it belonged to a man standing below a wheel he would not touch. "I want your trust, Briarene," he said. "I want more than the right to stand in a repaired dock. But wanting has no authority, and paying what I owed does not buy what you choose." The words asked nothing. That was why she could hear them. She looked across Dock 4. Joss alive, workers paid, dragons calm, inspectors independent, moonwater absent from the floor. The apprentice she had failed years ago would not return because one king had learned to wait. But this wall had held before romance entered the room. "Tomorrow," she said, "we test the east pump under live cradle weight." Aldren's eyes lifted. "You may stand at the pressure wheel," she said. "Below my hand. You turn only when I signal. If the gauge climbs wrong, you stop before I speak." A smile touched him, careful as a repaired seam. "Dismissible labor." "Civilian inspected labor," Briarene corrected. "Dismissible by me." At dawn, silver moonlight lay across the dry stone floor. Briarene stood at the wheel with her hand above Aldren's. Harbor dragons watched from the beams, calm and bright-eyed. The flagship rested level in its cradle. Briarene gave the signal. Aldren turned the wheel exactly as far as she allowed, then stopped. The stone held dry beneath them, and no worker had to drown before a warning was believed.